I feel like I come here only twice a year, one time to film the favorite books of the year and the second time to film the mid-year book freakout tag. But I don't care. Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to tell you about my reading year, which has sucked. I think I've only read like 11 books, which is better than last year because last year I read 10. But I haven't really loved any books. I haven't been in love with reading. And I really want to change that for the second half of the year, but today we're going to talk about the first half. And let's start with the first question. What is your favorite book of 2024 so far? The book that I know for sure will end up in my 2024 favorite books of the year is The Raw Shark Texts by Stephen Hall. And this is a very weird book. I found it from Books and Lala's channel. That's like very obvious, I feel like. She's my favorite YouTuber in the world. She's a genius. But this book is also kind of a work of genius. It's an ergodic book, and I didn't know what ergodic books were until very recently, but I discovered I am in fact in love with ergodic books, and I have read a lot in the past actually. But ergodic books are basically books that are hard to read and are experimental in their way of reading. So like House of Leaves is an ergodic book. It's like the classic one that everybody mentions. Basically, there's this guy called Eric Sanderson who suddenly wakes up and doesn't remember anything about his life. And he finds a note from himself, or from the first Eric Sanderson. And he tells him to go to Dr. Randall, and he keeps getting these letters from the first Eric Sanderson. And that is the catalyst of the story, because he doesn't remember anything about his life. And there's a lot that he will learn. And I don't want to tell you anything more than that, because truly a lot of things happen. I don't want to tell you why the book is called The Raw Shark Texts. Like, what do sharks have to do with anything? I'm not going to tell you. But yeah, that's one of the two books that I've given 5 stars this year. And yeah, we'll see. I really hope that this book gets dethroned by something even better, because it does feel like a very, very good book, but it doesn't feel like an all-time favorite. Moving on, favorite sequel. I feel like every year it's like a graphic novel, and it is this year again, because it is Heartstopper Volume 5. And this was the only sequel I read. Did I like this volume in particular? Not really. Actually, I think it was the least favorite Heartstopper that I read. And not much happens in this volume, to be honest. And there's only going to be one more, and that worries me. I mean, it worries me because I loved Heartstopper. Like Volume 1, 2, 3. Those were my favorites, and the ones that I read back to back. Every good thing comes to an end at some point, but Heartstopper is special to me because it made me realize that I love queer joy and I love queer love at a time that I was identifying as asexual and aromantic, and there's nothing wrong with identifying that way, but I really thought that I was that label until I read this book, and I was like, wait a second, I actually do want to experience this. The next question is a new release that has already been released that you are very excited to read. And for me, it's Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. So as you may or may not know, Kissed Her Once for Me by the same author was one of my favorite books of last year. My favorite romance in the world. And as a lesbian, I don't really have a lot of favorite romances because, first of all, not a lot of them are being written or published. And a lot of the time, they're not catered to me. They're usually femme for femme. And as somebody who is attracted to people who are more masculine than me, I don't really see that representation a lot. But in Kiss Her Once for me, it was exquisite. And in this book, again, one of the characters is feminine, and one of them is a chapstick lesbian, androgynous, not as masculine as in Kiss Her Once for Me, because in that one, the main love interest was butch. This one is more in the middle of the road. #fudge. Even though fudge is not a real word, I think I will really enjoy this because it's still a dynamic that I like. My most anticipated book for the second half of 2024 is The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. So I have read 2 books by this author. I've read the only sapphic ones because that's what I care about, to be honest. I haven't read Red, White, and Royal Blue because I don't care, to be very frank with you all. I don't care about men. So this book, there's a non-binary character and there is a man, a he, him character. We don't really know anything more than that, and I haven't really seen any reviews for this book. So I think that's the dynamic of the couple. I don't think it's like sapphic, obviously, because one of them is a man and the other person is non-binary. So it's like a very queer, bisexual book from what I've heard. And both of the characters are bisexual. They're in a trip to Europe in the summer and they're trying to outslut one another, basically trying to hook up with as many people as they can, and the one that hooks up with more people wins. But obviously they're gonna like re-fall in love with each other, and I'm excited to see how the dynamic plays out, especially because I've read like gay man books. I've read obviously a ton of lesbian books. I've read some books, like very few to be honest, with like trans characters, non-binary characters. Like the one that comes to mind is Old Enough, but this one is gonna be different because it's gonna involve a non-binary character and a man, and the non-binary books I've read in the past have involved a non-binary person and a woman. Gender, Anyway, I'm excited still, even though it's not sapphic. Next question is biggest disappointment, and I have 3 books. Can you tell it's been an amazing reading year? Yeah. So the first one is actually the first book I read this year, and that's Stoner. I don't remember the author. Williams? Anyway, Stoner is about this guy named Stoner. It is not actually about a stoner, and he goes to college first for agriculture, but then he changes his major to English literature, and then he starts teaching at the university, and then he also gets married, and it basically details his entire life. It's very A Little Life adjacent because it details his entire life. It's about a man who's miserable, and it's about a character who doesn't get better. So if you're a fan of Little Life, read this book. But also, I am the #1 fan of A Little Life, and I hated it because it's boring. Nothing happens, nothing good. A lot of bad things happen and nothing gets better. And sure, it's the same thing in A Little Life, but no, I disagree. There are some good things that happen in A Little Life. And in this book, it felt like nothing good was ever happening at all. And so I was not feeling it. The second book is Mrs. S by Kay Patrick. And this book is another sapphic book, lesbian book, with a butch lesbian main character that I was so excited to read. But the writing was unreadable. The sentences were unreadable. I struggled so much. And then I read some reviews that said, oh yeah, I felt the same way. And I was like, it's not worth it. Life is too short. And so I DNF'd it. And then the third book is Better by Far by Hazel Hayes. And if you have watched my favorite books of 2022 video, you know that another book by Hazel Hayes, her first novel, was one of my favorites. And so I was so excited to read this one, but it didn't hit in the same way. It was similar in themes, but there was something missing. Like, I kept reading, but I didn't care about the characters, didn't care about the story. Like, it was very introspective, and it also talks about the main character's relationship to her mother, who is dead. This is not a spoiler. And I have never dealt with loss of a parent, and I've also never dealt with loss of a significant other, which was the 2 main themes of this book. And so I felt really distant from the storyline, from the message, from the introspection of the main character. And so I didn't enjoy it. And a lot of other people from the reviews I read did not enjoy it. But I'll still read everything else she writes because I was in love with the first book. The biggest surprise of this year was actually a reread that was on audiobook. So last year, I read Couplets by Maggie Milner with my eyeballs, and I didn't like it. It was fine. And then this year, I read it with my ear holes, and this year, I loved it. I fell in love. It was 5 stars. This book is about a woman who is in a relationship with a man in the beginning of the novel, but then she meets a woman who is queer, who is a lesbian, and she starts falling in love with her, and this is her queer awakening. But things get complicated because the woman that she's falling for is polyamorous, and the main character, as much as she wants to be poly, she's so monogamous, and she cannot, for the life of her, do polyamory, and it basically ruins her life. The jealousy that she has for her love interest partners ruins her. It destroys everything. And it's a novel written in verse, and it's written beautifully. And the author narrates the audiobook, and I highly recommend you go with the audiobook because you will fall in love. And you will also understand it better because as somebody who's not like an English major, I was a biochem major. I graduated, yay. I was not reading poetry. I was reading academic articles on like proteins, okay? So poetry is not really in my wheelhouse, but when the author read the novel for me, I felt like I was more connected. I felt the emotion more, and I feel like I got it more. So I recommend going with that direction. Favorite author of this year has to go to Ivan Coyote, who wrote Tomboy Survival Guide, but also wrote a bunch of other books that I want to read in the future. But this year I read Tomboy Survival Guide. And this is a butch, lesbian, non-binary, trans author. And Tomboy Survival Guide is about their experiences being trans and also being queer. I haven't read a lot of books by trans authors, and I really want to change that because on TikTok I'm doing like a little challenge where I'm recommending a queer book every single day. And so far I've recommended only like 2 non-binary books. That's it. Which is very sad. I really want to read more books that have trans characters, but most of the time they're like side characters, like in Heartstopper. Like, I appreciate the trans representation, but the main characters are cis. Or like in Old Enough, there's a trans love interest, but that's not the main character. The main character is cis. And so I want to have more trans books that have trans characters at the center of the novel. So please recommend me some. And they can be nonfiction as well. I love nonfiction, queer, trans books. So yeah, I'm expecting recommendations if you watch this video. Next question is, what's your crush? And like, most of the books I read this year were nonfiction, so I don't have one. But I do have like a favorite couple, and that couple is the couple from Heartstopper, like the lesbian couple. Tara and Darcy. I can't believe I almost forgot their names. But yeah, they're lovely, they're amazing, and they have my heart. When they put 7 by Taylor Swift on the TV show during their scene, I literally sobbed because Taylor Swift is also one of my favorite #queer artists. Next question is favorite character. Again, I struggled with this. I was looking at all the books I read and I was like, which one has the favorite character? I don't know. None of them. None of them. So I'm not going to answer this question. I don't want to lie to you. Next question is book that made you cry. And I didn't cry while reading any of these books, but I did tear up a little when I read Moby Dyke, a book that details the author's journey visiting all the lesbian bars in America. I've never been to a lesbian bar because there isn't one here where I am, but one day hopefully I will go to one. The part where I teared up was the part where she is talking to these women that are part of Free Mom Hugs. And this is basically a company that goes to pride parades and gives free mom hugs. And they also go to weddings and act as parents when the people who are getting married do not have supportive parents. And that's where I lost it, y'all, because, you know, my parents are not the most supportive. So I was like, oh my God, if they don't come to my wedding, I can have these ladies come in. Amazing. Yeah, that's where I cried. A little bit. Next, a book that made me happy. This has been a terrible year, guys. I was not happy at any point of the year. So, not gonna lie, I don't want to answer this question either. I haven't really been happy. Sorry. Beautiful book you bought. I've only bought one book this year, and it was for school, and it was this one. This is The Sleep-Deprived Teen. Why our teenagers are so tired and how parents and schools can help them thrive. So I took a class this semester called Adolescence, and it was a psych class because I did a psychology minor because I had room in my schedule to do one. And one of our projects was to read a book that was psych related, obviously, and present on it. And I read it and I tabbed it, and it was a good book. I learned some things, so it was not bad. But yeah, I'm never gonna read this again. I do like the color scheme, but yeah, on the inside it's just text. And what are some books that I need to read by the end of the year? Oh, they're actually right there. Let me grab them. I have here 2 books that I need to read by the end of the year. The first one I will finish very soon. I will finish probably tomorrow. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And this is an author from Lebanon. And I got this recommendation from Emmy, the YouTube channel here on YouTube. The YouTube channel here on YouTube. And this is a bunch of poems, basically, on life lessons that the Prophet or Khalil Gibran gives you. And my favorites so far, I think, were the poem on children and on marriage. The one on children was how your children are basically not your children. You have to let them free to become who they are. And as somebody who, you know, has been under the influence of my parents on what to do with my career for a long time until very recently, where I decided to be more independent and make my own decisions, I highly related to that. And the one that I liked that was not this one that I just mentioned was also the marriage one, because it talked about how in marriages you are obviously a unit, but you're also 2 separate people, and you need to keep yourselves as such. You cannot be so intertwined with each other that you become one. You still need to be 2 separate people living as such, living life as your full person. Like, you know how people say, this is my other half? No, Khalil Gibran says no. You need to be your own whole and then find another whole and be together. I hope it makes sense. And the other book is Sirens and Muses by Antonia Angres. This is a very bisexual book. I have noticed that a lot of lesbians sometimes, like once they discover they're lesbians, they don't read bisexual literature anymore because they're like, well, I'm not bisexual anymore. Why do I need to read bi books? I disagree with that. I still really enjoy reading books about bisexuality, even though I am not bisexual. Like, I still read books about like gay men. Like A Little Life is one of my favorite books of all time. I'm not a gay man. I'm like the complete opposite of that. I still love it, and I still like want to consume literature about those types of experiences, even if they're different from my experience. And this book is about these kids in college. They're studying art, so it's a very different experience from my experience, again, because I'm a STEM student graduate now. 2 of them are girls. They're both bisexual, and I think they have some sort of romantic involvement later on in the book. The other one is a guy. He's doing a lot of like internet shit. And the 4th one is like an old man who does art and also teaches a little bit at the university. I don't know, I just started the book. I haven't really gotten into it that much. But I'm excited, and the cover is so gorgeous. But yeah, it's interesting to read a book that has two bisexual women in a relationship with one another, because mostly we see two lesbians or one lesbian, one bisexual woman be in a relationship with one another. And like usually that is the reality. Unfortunately, most bi women do end up not with other women. But this is gonna be interesting to see how the dynamic plays out. While I'm on vacation, I don't know which one of these to bring with me, but I have these two. This is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I have read a book by him years ago. It was The Pearl. It was very short. This one is not so short, but I think this will be very readable if I do bring it. Now, this one is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared by Jonason. I love that name, it's so funny. And just like the name, the book is also funny. This was one of the Drinking by My Shelf recommendations that I got years ago. Still haven't read, but I found this last year at a sale. So, a funny book, a comedy. Perfect for vacation. So should I bring this, or should I bring the John Steinbeck one and act pretentious in the airplane? Let me know. So yeah, I hope you like this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time, which will probably be December. But I want to change that. I want to make more videos. I want to make a video where I talk about my university experiences, drinking by my shelf, everything I did at university. I also want to do other videos. I haven't done a Pride one yet. I should do that too. As a lesbian, I'm ashamed I haven't done it yet. So, bye.